to make sure Britt's okay. Who is she?
You mean who was she? She's supposed to be dead.
The oppressive, sterile silence of General Hospital's 9th-floor waiting room was broken only by the frantic, rhythmic tapping of Laura Collins's pen against the cover of a forgotten magazine, a staccato counterpoint to the low, guttural hum of the HVAC system that did little to dispel the chill of dread that had taken root in the space. Across from her, Curtis Ashford sat with a statuesque stillness, his hands clasped so tightly together that the knuckles were a bloodless white, his unseeing gaze fixed on the muted television screen where a cheerful morning show host demonstrated the perfect way to carve a pumpkin, the mundane normalcy of the outside world feeling like a cruel, parallel universe. The air was thick with the ghosts of conversations past, the whispered pleas to a disinterested God, the fractured apologies, the hollow reassurances, all of them swirling around the two central, unspoken questions that had brought them here in the pre-dawn hours. Would Drew Kane survive the emergency surgery to repair the catastrophic damage from the pier explosion, and would his fiancée, Elizabeth Weber, ever forgive herself for being the one who, in a moment of panicked confusion, had pulled him directly into the blast's path? Down the hall, in the stark, unforgiving glow of the surgical suite's observation room, Elizabeth herself stood like a specter at the glass, her face pale and tear-streaked, her arms wrapped tightly around her middle as if physically holding her shattered pieces together. She watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the skilled hands of Dr. Terry Randolph and her team worked with frantic, focused precision inside the cavern of Drew's chest, a brutal ballet of clamps and sutures against a backdrop of flashing monitors and the steady, insistent beep of the heart-lung machine that was, for now, the only thing keeping death at bay. Each drop of blood that welled up and was swiftly suctioned away felt like a drop from her own soul, a permanent stain on their future that she had caused. The memory was a relentless, punishing loop in her mind. The foggy pier, the shouted warning from Jason Morgan, the deafening roar, the searing heat, and Drew's body shielding hers before the world went black. Her guilt was a physical weight, a leaden cloak that pressed her deeper into the cold linoleum floor, and she barely registered the steadying presence of Portia Robinson, who had slipped into the room not as chief of staff, but as a friend, her hand coming to rest gently on Elizabeth's trembling shoulder in a silent offer of anchor in the storm. Elsewhere in the hospital, the shock waves of the explosion were rippling through other lives with devastating consequence. In a private room on the 5th floor, Carly Spencer was methodically shredding a tissue into a tiny snowdrift of confetti on her lap, her usual fiery composure utterly dissolved as she waited for any news on her son, Michael, who was being treated for a severe concussion and smoke inhalation after being pulled from the water near the wreckage. Her ex-husband, Sonny Corinthos, paced the limited floor space like a caged tiger, his movements sharp and agitated, the scent of smoke and sea salt still clinging to his jacket, a pungent reminder of the chaos, his mind racing through a labyrinth of potential enemies and retaliatory strikes, the businessman in him already calculating the cost of this declaration of war, while the father in him was screaming in a silent, primal fury. The fragile truce they had built over the years for the sake of their children had evaporated in the fireball, replaced by a shared, terrifying vulnerability that left no room for their old arguments. Meanwhile, in the dim, cluttered confines of his PI office, John Jacks was staring at a grainy, black-and-white photograph that had been anonymously delivered to his door an hour before the explosion, the image showing a familiar, sharp-featured woman with intense eyes, his believed-to-be dead wife, Britt Westbourne, very much alive and standing in what appeared to be a European train station. A discovery so earth-shattering it had momentarily eclipsed even the news of the disaster at the port, leaving him to grapple with a tsunami of hope, betrayal, and confusion entirely alone. Back in the hospital's main lobby, the epicenter of the public fallout, chaos reigned as reporters jostled for position behind a cordon of police tape, their shouted questions creating a cacophonous wall of sound that security struggled to contain, while a pale and visibly shaken Willow Tate gave a brief, trembling statement to the press about the community's resilience, her voice faltering only when she mentioned the brave first responders, her thoughts clearly with her husband, Michael. Upstairs, through the swinging doors of the ER, paramedics continued to stream in with the less critically injured, the air thick with the smells of antiseptic, burnt plastic, and fear, and it was here that Ava Jerome, having just confirmed her daughter, Avery, was safe and unharmed, cornered a harried-looking Nina Reeves by the vending machines. Her eyes narrowed into venomous slits as she hissed, "This has your new business partner, Pikeman, written all over it, doesn't it, Nina? Your desperate grab for power and validation just nearly killed half of Port Charles. When the truth comes out, and it will, Cyrus Renault will be the least of your worries." Nina, looking ghostly and shaken, could only shake her head in a weak, frantic denial, her carefully constructed world of corporate influence and social standing feeling as fragile as glass in that moment. Up in the ICU, where the light was a perpetual, grim twilight, Anna Devane kept a silent vigil at the bedside of Valentine Cassadine, who was sedated and stable after shrapnel removal, her hand resting over his, her mind a whirlwind of Interpol intelligence and personal regret, wondering if this attack was connected to their recent, quiet investigation into the shadowy Pikeman organization and its mysterious leader, a figure known only as the Meridian, whose tendrils seemed to be reaching into the very heart of the city. And in the one place of quiet refuge, the hospital chapel, Jordan Ashford knelt not in prayer, but in sheer exhaustion, the weight of the badge feeling heavier than ever before, her mind already piecing together the fragments of evidence, the type of explosive, the timing, the specific targeting of the warehouse district, all of it pointing not to a random act of terror, but a calculated, chillingly precise message, one that she knew, with a cold certainty settling in her gut, was only the beginning. The entire hospital, from its bustling, public entrances to its most secluded, sterile corridors, had become a microcosm of a city on the brink, a sprawling stage where the fates of lovers, families, and enemies were inextricably intertwined, each person a solitary island of their own particular anguish, yet all connected by the invisible, unbreakable threads of shared history and the looming, unanswered question that hung heavier than the silence in the surgical waiting room. In a town built on secrets and vengeance, who would be left standing when the dust from this latest, most devastating explosion finally settled? Carly, Laura Wright, who is nominated for a Daytime Emmy, currently has to worry about the cops turning their attention to her or Michael, Rory Gibson. It turns out they both recently visited Elizabeth's home. Cops might read that as their opportunity to plant Edward's gun to frame Willow, Caitlin McMullen, for Drew's shooting.